The golden lights flickered between the ancient apple trees like dying stars. Hundreds of people had gathered under the warm September sky in Snoqualmie Valley. Laughter mixed with the sweet scent of fresh-pressed cider and ripe fruit. Strings of bulbs swayed gently in the evening breeze, casting a soft glow over the long wooden tables covered in white cloths. This was supposed to be a night of joy. The 50th anniversary of Quill Heritage Orchard. 50 years of my family's hands in this soil. 50 years of early mornings, late harvests, and quiet pride passed down through 4 generations. I stood near the side of the raised wooden stage, my dress shirt suddenly feeling too tight against my chest. The whole town had come. Neighbors who had worked these rows for decades, old friends, local reporters with cameras ready. Even the mayor sat smiling in the front row. Then my brother walked up to the microphone. Soren Quill looked perfect. Tailored navy suit, confident stride, that familiar smile he once used when we raced through the orchard as kids. But tonight, something was different. His eyes carried a cold shine I didn't recognize. He tapped the mic. The crowd fell quiet, expectant. "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate this milestone," he began, his voice smooth and strong, carrying easily across the orchard. Quill Heritage Orchard has been part of our family for 50 years. 4 generations have poured their hearts into these trees. A warm round of applause rose up. Soren paused, letting it build. Then he leaned forward slightly, gripping the edges of the podium. "And tonight, I'm proud to announce that I have successfully finalized the sale of the entire property, every acre, every tree, the packing house, the old family home, to AgriCorp." The applause died instantly. A few nervous chuckles broke the silence, as if people thought he was joking. He wasn't. "Damian Rook, the CEO of AgriCorp, is here with us this evening," Soren continued, gesturing toward a tall man in a dark suit who stood and nodded with a satisfied smile. "This deal brings real progress to our valley. Modern methods, steady jobs, real money. No more depending on the weather or fighting year after year just to survive. This is the future we deserve." My breath caught sharp in my throat. I turned toward the front table where our parents sat. Harlan Quill, my father, had gone completely still. His weathered face, usually so steady after decades working the land, looked drained of all color. His hands lay flat on the tablecloth, fingers spread as if trying to hold on to something solid. Beside him, Mara Quill, my mother, pressed one trembling hand over her mouth. Her eyes glistened with sudden tears. She blinked rapidly, as though the words might disappear if she just refused to believe them. They hadn't known. Not one word. Soren had never asked them, never warned them, never given them a chance to speak. A heavy, burning pain sliced through my chest, sharp and deep, like a cold knife driven slowly between my ribs, twisting with every heartbeat. This land wasn't just dirt and trees. It was the place where Grandpa taught us to graft new branches, where Mom sang old songs while picking apples at dawn, where my little sister Freya and I had run barefoot, laughing until our sides hurt, where Dad had stood every harvest season, proud of what our family had built with calloused hands and quiet love. All of it, sold away in secret. I felt my legs weaken, my hands clenched at my sides until the nails bit into my palms. A few feet away, Freya Quill stood frozen, her young face pale under the golden lights. Her eyes met mine, wide, terrified, silently pleading for me to do something, to stop this nightmare. But what could I say? The papers were already signed. The deal was sealed. Soren kept speaking, his voice rising with excitement now. He waved Damian Rook onto the stage like an old friend. The 2 men shook hands as cameras flashed, and in that terrible moment, surrounded by the scent of ripe apples and the soft rustle of leaves, I understood with brutal clarity. My brother hadn't just sold an orchard. He had taken a knife and driven it straight into the living heart of our family, smiling the entire time. The golden lights were gone. Only 3 days had passed since that night under the apple trees, but the orchard already felt like a different world. I stood on the old porch of our family home, the wooden boards creaking under my boots the same way they had since I was a boy. Morning mist still clung to the rows of trees, but the usual peace was gone. Everything felt heavy, broken. Inside the kitchen, Mom sat at the worn oak table with an official letter in her hands. Her fingers trembled slightly as she read it again, as if the words might change if she looked long enough. Dad stood by the window, staring out at the orchard with empty eyes. The same window where he used to watch the sunrise every single morning before heading out to check the trees. They had received the formal notice yesterday. Quill Heritage Orchard no longer belonged to the Quill family. Every acre, every tree, the packing house, even this old wooden house that had sheltered 4 generations, all of it now belonged to AgriCorp. The letter was cold, legal, and final. They had 30 days to remove their personal belongings and vacate the property. 30 days. Mom lowered the paper slowly. Her voice came out small, almost a whisper. I don't understand. How could he do this without telling us? Dad didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at the rows of apple trees that his own father had planted. His shoulders, once so strong from years of hard labor, seemed to sag under an invisible weight. The lines on his face looked deeper this morning. Older. I leaned against the door frame, my chest tight. Every familiar sound felt wrong now. The distant call of birds, the soft rustle of leaves, even the smell of coffee Mom had made out of habit. It all felt like it was already slipping away. Freya sat across from Mom, her knees pulled up to her chest like she was trying to make herself smaller. At 22, she still had that same wide-eyed look she used to get when thunderstorms rolled through the valley. But this time the storm was inside our home. He won't even answer his phone, she said quietly, her voice cracking. I called him 6 times yesterday, straight to voicemail. I swallowed hard. I had tried calling Soren too, the brother who used to sneak me extra slices of pie when Mom wasn't looking. The brother I had followed through these orchards for years. Now his number felt like it belonged to a stranger. The silence in the kitchen stretched long and painful. I kept seeing flashes of that night. Soren's confident smile under the golden lights, the way he had shaken hands with Damien Rook like they were celebrating a victory. While our parents sat there, blindsided, their entire life's work sold away without a single conversation. Mom finally set the letter down. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. Not yet. She looked exhausted, like the fight had already been drained out of her. Your father and I built this place together, she said softly, her gaze drifting to the old photographs on the wall. Black and white images of Grandpa standing proudly beside young saplings. We woke before dawn every harvest season. We stayed up late worrying about frost. We taught you boys and Freya how to love this land. Her voice faltered for just a moment. And now, we have 30 days to leave the only home we've ever known. Dad turned from the window at last. His jaw was tight, but his eyes carried a deep, quiet pain I had never seen before. He placed a rough hand on Mom's shoulder, trying to offer comfort, but his own fingers shook slightly. Outside, the orchard looked the same as always, heavy with fruit, branches swaying gently in the breeze. But to me, it felt like the roots had been violently torn from the earth. Everything that had grounded us was being ripped away, and the person who did it shared our blood. That night, Freya found me sitting on the back steps. The stars were bright above the trees, but neither of us could enjoy them. I keep thinking about when we were kids, she whispered, hugging her arms around herself. Soren carrying me on his shoulders when the rows got too long, teaching me how to climb the old oak tree. Now, I don't even recognize him. I nodded slowly. The same memories had been haunting me too, but every warm recollection now carried a sharp edge of betrayal. A heavy weight pressed down on my chest, thick and suffocating, like a block of cold lead. The injustice burned deep, not just the loss of land or money, but the humiliation. The way Soren had discarded us so easily, as if our family's sacrifices meant nothing compared to his new future in Seattle. He had already moved. We heard through a neighbor that he had taken a high-level management position at AgriCorp, a sleek apartment in the city. No more calls, no more visits. Complete silence. As I sat there with my little sister under the vast night sky, staring at the orchard that would soon belong to someone else, something dark and unfamiliar began to stir inside me. Anger. Not the hot, loud kind that fades quickly. This was colder, deeper, the kind that settles in your bones and refuses to leave. Freya looked at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears and quiet fear. "What are we going to do, Kairos?" I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew one thing for certain. We couldn't just let this happen, not without a fight. The days blurred into a heavy, aching silence. We had less than 3 weeks left before we were forced to leave the only home we had ever known. The orchard looked the same on the surface, golden apples still hanging heavy on the branches, but everything beneath felt wrong, hollow. I couldn't sleep. Every night I lay awake listening to the old house settle, wondering how many more nights we had left in these walls. That's when the idea first took root. Quiet, secret, dangerous. It started with a knock on the back door just after midnight. Freya and I slipped outside into the cool darkness. Clara Beaumont was already waiting under the shadow of the big oak tree near the edge of the property. She was 78 years old, thin and tough as weathered barn wood. She had worked these orchards since she was a teenager, back when my grandfather first hired her. Her silver hair caught the moonlight as she nodded to us without a word. We didn't speak much at first. Words felt too risky. Instead, we moved like ghosts through the old storage barn and down into the musty basement beneath the packing house, flashlights cutting narrow beams through decades of dust. Clara knew every corner, every hidden shelf where important papers had been kept for generations. Night after night we met, sometimes just the three of us, sometimes only Freya and me when Clara couldn't slip away from her own small farm. We worked in near silence, the only sounds being the rustle of old folders and the occasional creak of wooden floorboards. My hands grew dirty from handling boxes that hadn't been opened in 20 years. At first, we found nothing but old harvest records and faded photographs that made my chest tighten with memories I didn't want to face right now. But then, things began to surface. One night, Clara pulled out a thick manila envelope from the very back of a locked metal cabinet. Her hands were steady, but I saw the slight tremble in her fingers as she opened it. Inside were copies of documents Soren had filed, documents with signatures that didn't look quite right. Freya leaned closer, her breath catching sharply. "Look at Dad's signature," she whispered. "He never signs his name like that. The loop on the Q is wrong." I felt ice slide down my spine. We kept digging. More papers, more discrepancies, bank records showing unusually large transfers right before the sale. A series of emails printed out and hidden away. Messages between Soren and Damien Rook discussing how to handle the family situation and minimize resistance. One line in particular burned itself into my memory. "They'll get over it once the money starts coming in." Clara sat back on an old wooden crate, her face grim in the flashlight glow. "They didn't just sell the land," she said quietly, her voice rough from years of working outdoors. "They forged what they couldn't get honestly, and they paid people to look the other way." I stared at the growing pile of evidence. This wasn't a simple business deal gone wrong. This was calculated. Soren and Damien Rook had deliberately crushed our family's legacy under their heels. They had taken the years of early mornings, the frostbitten fingers, the laughter and tears poured into this soil, and treated it all like it was worthless. Like we were worthless. Every new piece of proof felt like another twist of that knife from the night of the anniversary. I kept seeing Dad's empty eyes at the kitchen window, Mom's trembling hands holding that eviction letter, Freya's frightened face under the golden lights, the way our family had been publicly humiliated in front of the entire town. The pain in my chest slowly began to change. It didn't disappear. It hardened into something colder, something sharper. Late one night, after Clara had gone home and Freya had finally fallen asleep on the old couch in the living room, I stood alone among the silent rows of apple trees. The moon hung low and silver above the orchard. I whispered into the darkness, my voice barely louder than the rustling leaves. "You took everything from us, Soren." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. "But you made one mistake." I looked out over the land that had raised me, the land that was supposed to be passed down, not stolen. You forgot that some roots run deeper than greed. A quiet, calculated fire began to burn low in my gut. Not wild rage, not blind anger. This was different. Controlled. Patient. The kind of fire that doesn't consume everything at once, but waits for the perfect moment to strike back. Freya joined me the next evening as we walked the perimeter of the property one last time before darkness fell. She slipped her small hand into mine, the way she did when we were children, and thunder scared her. "Kairos, are we really going to do this?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. There was fear there, yes, but also something new. Determination. I squeezed her hand gently. "We have to." Because this was no longer just about saving the orchard. It was about reclaiming our family's honor. About proving that what 4 generations had built with love and sweat could not be erased by one man's ambition and a handful of forged signatures. As the shadows grew longer across the rows of trees, I felt the plan beginning to take shape in my mind. Cold, careful, unstoppable. The morning air carried the sharp smell of diesel and freshly turned earth. Heavy machinery stood silent at the edge of the orchard, waiting. Yellow tape marked off sections where the first trees were scheduled to come down. Today was supposed to be the beginning of the end for Quill Heritage Orchard. But we had other plans. I stood with Freya and Clara Beaumont behind a long table we had set up near the old packing house. Cameras clicked, reporters murmured. Local news vans lined the dirt road. Word had spread quietly through the valley that something important was happening at the orchard this morning. We had invited them all. And we had invited AgriCorp, too. A black SUV pulled up slowly. Damien Rook stepped out first, adjusting his expensive suit with a confident smirk. Right behind him came Soren. My brother walked with the same easy stride he had used on the anniversary night, as if he still owned the ground beneath his feet. They both froze when they saw the crowd, when they saw me standing at the center of it all. I waited until the cameras focused and the murmurs died down. My heart pounded hard against my ribs, but my voice came out steady, cold, clear. "Good morning," I said, looking directly at Soren. "Thank you all for coming. Today we're here to set the record straight about the so-called sale of Quill Heritage Orchard." Soren's face tightened. Damien Rook crossed his arms, still trying to look in control. I lifted the thick folder in my hands. These documents prove that the sale was built on lies, forged signatures, manipulated legal papers, and bribes paid to ensure no one asked too many questions. A ripple of shock moved through the reporters. I continued, my voice never rising, never shaking. Damien Rook and my brother Soren Quill worked together to fake my father's signature on multiple contracts. They altered dates. They hid payments. They treated 4 generations of honest work like it was something to be thrown away for profit. I placed the folder down and looked straight at Soren. You didn't just sell land, brother. You tried to erase who we are. The cameras flashed wildly. Damien Rook started to speak, his face turning red, but before he could get a word out, two sheriff's deputies stepped forward from the side. One of them held up a warrant. Mr. Rook, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The confident smirk vanished. Damien Rook looked suddenly small as they led him away. Soren stood alone now, his face drained of all color. His mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. His eyes darted from the reporters to me, then to the folder lying open on the table. All the proof laid bare in the morning light. That was when Mom and Dad stepped out from behind the old oak tree. They didn't look broken anymore. Harlan Quill walked tall, his weathered hand resting gently on Mom's shoulder. Mara Quill carried a small recorder in her hands. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet but carried clearly across the gathered crowd. For months we recorded every conversation, she said. Every call, every meeting Soren thought we didn't know about. We stayed silent because we hoped our son would come to his senses. Dad's voice was deeper, rough with emotion he rarely showed. We gave you everything, son. Our time, our sweat, our trust, and you chose to destroy it all for money and a fancy title. Soren's legs seemed to give out. He dropped to his knees right there in the dirt, surrounded by cameras and the trees he had tried to sell. His shoulders shook. Tears cut clean tracks down his face. Dad. Mom. His voice cracked, raw and broken. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Please forgive me. The orchard fell into a heavy silence. Only the wind moved through the leaves. I watched my brother kneeling there, the same man who had once carried Freya on his shoulders through these very rows, the same man who had laughed with me under these trees when we were boys. Now he looked small, lost, terrified. For the first time since the anniversary night, I felt something shift inside my chest. The cold fire of revenge was still there, but it no longer burned alone. Something softer was trying to rise beside it. Mom stepped forward slowly. She didn't touch him yet. She simply looked down at her eldest son with eyes full of exhaustion, love, and deep, lingering pain. Getting on your knees is easy, Soren, she said gently. Living with what you did, that's going to be much harder. Dad remained silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he spoke, his voice low and heavy. You wanted progress so badly. Now you'll have to face the consequences of it. The reporters kept filming. The cameras kept clicking. But in that moment, none of it mattered. The machinery was gone. The yellow tape had been taken down. The heavy silence that once hung over the orchard slowly gave way to the familiar sounds of wind moving through leaves and birds calling across the rows. AgriCorp had no choice. The evidence was overwhelming. They canceled the entire contract and returned full ownership of Quill Heritage Orchard to our family, along with a substantial settlement that helped repair what had been damaged. But some things couldn't be fixed with money. Soren lost everything. His high-paying position at AgriCorp disappeared overnight. His reputation in the valley was shattered. Old friends turned away when they saw him in town. He lived alone in a small rented room on the edge of Snoqualmie, far from the life he had tried so hard to build. For weeks after the press conference, he stayed away. Then one quiet evening, he showed up at the old house. He stood on the porch steps with his head down, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. No suit, just worn jeans and a faded shirt. His eyes carried deep shadows. Mom opened the door. Dad stood behind her, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Soren's voice was barely above a whisper. I know I don't deserve to ask for anything, but if you'll let me, I want to come back. Not as the man who tried to sell this place. Just as your son." There was a long, painful pause. Freya stood beside me in the doorway, her hand gripping my arm tightly. I could feel her trembling. Dad spoke first, his voice rough but steady. "We're not throwing you away, Soren, but trust isn't given back so easily. You'll work the land with us, every day, for 2 full years, no shortcuts, no excuses, and you'll see Dr. Tessa Vesper twice a week," Mom added softly, her eyes glistening. "You broke something deep in this family. Words won't mend it. Only time and honest work might." Soren nodded slowly. A single tear slipped down his cheek. "I understand." And so the real work began. Every morning before dawn, the 4 of us, Dad, Mom, Freya, and I, walked the rows together again. Soren joined us. At first he moved awkwardly, his hands soft from years behind a desk. Blisters formed quickly. His back ached. He said very little those first months, just worked beside us in silence. I watched him carefully. Some days he looked like he wanted to quit. His eyes would drift toward the road leading out of the valley, as if remembering the life he had almost chosen. But he never left. Dr. Tessa Vesper's office became part of his routine. He never talked much about those sessions, but I noticed small changes. The way he started listening when Dad explained how to prune a branch properly. The way he began asking Freya about her dreams for the future of the orchard. Slowly, painfully, something inside him began to shift. One hot afternoon in the middle of the second summer, I found him kneeling alone between 2 old trees, his hands covered in dirt. Sweat ran down his face. He was carefully tying a young sapling to a stake. He looked up when he heard me approach. "I used to think the value was in what we could sell," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Now, I see it's in the roots, in the way this land holds us together even when we try to tear it apart." I didn't reply right away. I simply handed him another length of twine. That small moment stayed with me. 2 years passed. The orchard looked stronger than ever. The trees we had cared for together stood tall and heavy with fruit once again. On the evening of the 52nd anniversary, we gathered under the same old oak tree where Clara Beaumont had first met us in the shadows. This time there were no golden stage lights, no big announcements for cameras, just family, a few close neighbors, and the quiet glow of string lights strung between the branches. Soren stepped forward. He wore the same simple work shirt he had worn every day in the orchard. No suit, no polished smile. He looked at Mom and Dad for a long moment, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I stood here 2 years ago and tried to sell our home for my own ambition," he said, his voice steady but full of raw feeling. "I hurt you both deeply. I hurt Kairos and Freya. I tried to erase everything this family built with love and sacrifice." He paused, swallowing hard. "Today, I don't stand here to take anything. I stand here to say thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for giving me the chance to work this soil again, and to remember who I really am." Mom's hand reached out and gently touched his arm. Dad nodded slowly, his jaw tight with emotion he still struggled to show. Then, as the sun began to set, painting the orchard in soft gold and orange, we did something together as a family. We planted a new apple tree, right in the center of the oldest section. Soren dug the hole with careful, calloused hands. Freya held the young sapling steady. Mom and Dad guided the roots into the earth. I helped pack the soil around it. When we finished, we stood back and looked at the small tree, fragile but full of promise. It wasn't just a tree. It was a symbol of roots that had been torn and were now growing again, stronger, deeper, together. This is the story of how greed almost destroyed a family's legacy faster than any storm ever could. But patience, truth, and unconditional love helped those torn roots take hold once more and grow into something even more beautiful than before. Because in the end, the richest harvest isn't measured in money or power. It's measured in the quiet moments when a broken family chooses to stay, when forgiveness is earned, not demanded, and when new life is planted in the very same soil that once witnessed the deepest pain. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours, thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. Each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.